Spiritual Sexual Shamanic Podcast. I am Simon, and today we are talking to Raffaello Manacorda, who is a lead facilitator with ISTA and a member of ISTA's governing council. So Raffaello is an international Tantra teacher and practitioner who's been practicing Tantra for more than 15 years. And he's undergone intensive training in several styles of yoga. After completing an MA in philosophy, Raffaello decided to spend more than 12 years in alternative communities and experimenting with radically alternative lifestyles. In these wild years, he first encountered Tantra, the rebel way to spirit. This encounter developed into a lifelong practice, first on a solo journey, then studying Tantra and yoga in some of the best worldwide schools. He's currently also enrolled in a PhD program in wisdom studies with Ubiquity University in California. He's also the co-creator of ISTA's practitioner training, which is ISTA's program for coaches and practitioners in the field of conscious sexuality. Raffa, thanks so much. Third time on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Simon, for having me again as a returning guest.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good to speak to you again. I think last time we were talking about music and community, and that was sort of to accompany the ISTA songbook, which you masterminded, and that was a beautiful discussion that we had. But today we're talking about something that actually feels quite different. Today we're going to be talking about this idea of shamanic leadership, right? My perception is that a lot of, certainly not everyone, but there's a decent number of people who come to ISTA trainings wanting to explore leadership in some way, right? Whether that's to step into their power, to start something new in the world, maybe transform onto a new path in their life. And for me, at least, these motivations that some people have when they come to an ISTA training have something to do with leadership. But you proposed to talk about this idea of shamanic leadership, and I imagine this is quite different to maybe conventional modes of leadership that we see in the world. So how would you begin this conversation around shamanic leadership?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So I think you already kind of created a bridge for us to start this conversation when you said, I imagine that a lot of people that come to ISTA trainings, and we can broaden this, a lot of people that go to any kind of workshop or transformational event may, on some level, be attracted by this idea of step into your leadership, become more of a leader. And it's a good conversation starter because I find something beautiful in that. And as I will try to illustrate, it's because behind this theme of leadership, there is the theme of power lurking in the background, which is one of the major important themes for human beings. But also at the same time, this shows us, in my opinion, how totally ubiquitous the word leadership is, and it's been thrown around, in many different ways, and it's actually become really confusing. Is it really the case that we all need to be leaders somewhere in order to be fulfilled? What does that even mean? And if we are leaders of whom, right? So, because in the traditional sort of dictionary definition, a leader, and so leadership is the quality of the activity of being a leader, but a leader would be someone that guides a group of people somewhere, towards a certain goal. So I would like to explore this and to actually propose a bit of a different view on the whole theme, and to show that much as it happens with sexuality, our idea that leadership is just like some extra quality that we can add on top of ourselves to become bigger and bolder and stronger is very naive, actually, that there's something much deeper at play here that has less to do with our, the inflation of our personality and the desire that we have to be more and more and more. And it has more to do with shamanic aspects of life, which means with energies and patterns and dynamics that are way beyond our personal desires and gains. So that's my angle, and I will explain it much more. But I would say, to start the conversation, if you'd like, I would like, as I said, it's kind of intuitive. We talk about leadership. We are really talking about power. So for me, before we enter into what is leadership, what does even shamanic, what does it mean to speak about shamanic leadership, we need to have a moment to reflect on power. So that's where I would suggest that we start from.
Totally. Well, yeah. I mean, tell me. I can think of many leaders. I often think of sports leaders. Just if I call to my mind, yeah, the idea of leadership. I played a lot of sport growing up, team sport, and the captain of the Australian cricket team. They called him the second most important. They called it the second most important job in Australia. The first being the prime minister, like in politics. So politics, sport, institutions. You think of leaders, and I guess we project a lot onto leaders. We assume that leadership means this, that, or the other thing. And you mentioned this idea of power, of course, yeah. But like I think of lines like, with great responsibility with great power comes great responsibility, right? And leaders are largely responsible for a lot. So these are some of the things that come to my mind when we throw these words up into the air. But you really want to hone in on power. So what is there to say about power when it comes to leadership?
Right. What is power? Like, first of all, I think it's good to understand that even if we don't have a clear definition, which I will try to give some, power, just saying power is powerful. Like, power is fascinating for human beings in a very similar way than sex and money. Sex, money, and power are a triad. And this is actually, there is some deep wisdom behind the statement. They fascinate us. They also scare us, and we have all kind of ideas and projections on why, depending, on the cultural bias or where each person is at, why sex is dangerous and attractive, or money is dangerous and attractive, or power is dangerous and attractive. So they are really a triad, and they are some of the most fundamental energies that we deal with. So there's many angles, that we can use to understand power. But for me, you mentioned when you were presenting me at the beginning of the podcast, an important part of my life had to do with Tantra, yoga, and kind of relating the understanding of the universe to the understanding of the human body system. That's what yoga really does. And so I would like to start there by saying that according to one of the great wisdom traditions, really, of humanity, which is the tantric yogic tradition, when we say power, we are really talking about energy, right? And this energy can be understood and located pretty precisely in our body, in our human system. And on a first level, power would be no more and no less than life force, energy, vitality, that battery that we all have in lesser or greater extent. And, when you feel healthy and strong mentally and physically, you feel that you have power. Now, you may not know at all what to do with it, but there is a sense of vitality, life, power as basically, when we say there's power in a battery, the battery is powerful when it has a high charge. So this, in the yogic tantric system, is located or individuated mainly in the root of our being. So while we in Western culture may often be tempted to associate power with the mind, with powerful leaders as having like a vision and a plan and a master plan. And that's not wrong. And I will come to that a little later. But the very first basic understanding of power has to do with the energy, with the vitality, with the life force that we all have, and that according to the fields of embodied spirituality that I know about mostly is located in our root. So in our root means in our anus, in our genitals, in the part of our system that is closer to the earth, more earthy. So that's the first thing. And the only thing I want to say about the last thing I want to say about power understood this way is that power understood in this way is very basic. It's just like, again, life force, energy doesn't have a lot of qualifications to it. You cannot speak about soft power versus hard power, masculine power versus feminine power. No, it's much more indifferentiated, raw energy. But then there are more understandings that come on top of this one. So I will leave it at this for now. And this is kind of like the first step that I wanted to present.
Totally, right. So what you're saying is this power is literally in our bodies, but maybe in a different way to our organs being in our bodies or our bones being in our bodies.
Right.
It's energy. It's what, like we can feel this power that you're talking about, but it's a different kind of feeling than touching ourselves, for example.
Yes.
On our arms.
Yes.
It's this feeling of power, and it's literally happening in our bodies. This is super interesting. This is a super interesting place to start from, because we've got this idea of the power being in our bodies, and then this maybe external idea of people in powerful positions, which is maybe like a symbolic power, or they've earned that powerful position. And so we have this idea maybe in our minds and have had all of our lives. But then we're making what seems like maybe quite a big leap over to this idea of there being power, like, as you said, raw power, simple power in our bodies that we get just from the fact that we're a human being.
Exactly. And only a very complex system of society has enabled us to disconnect, as you were saying, power, as in social power, from any vitality. So it is true that nowadays we can have leaders that are completely disconnected from their body, that have very low life force. It is possible, but it is possible only because we created a system that allows that to happen. And so, and I will say that if we want to understand power, we cannot stop at what I just said. We cannot stop as power at the level of power as life force. There is more. And the next step would be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would love to know what the next step is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going there. So the next step really, and I would even, invite you to like visualize it as we talked about the root of our body, the genitals, the anus. So traditionally in the yogic and tantric system, you go from the bottom up, right? So that's, the root is the very first center that you encounter. And then going upwards, then the second big seat of power would be what in Yoga and Tantra is referred to as the third chakra. So more or less at the level of the navel chakra. So we skipped over the second chakra, not because it's unimportant, but because it's less related to power. So then we get to the third one. And the third one is where we perceive, feel, use power, I would say, as willpower. Okay, so here it's already a more complex form of energy than just raw life force. Life force is or is not. There isn't much else to that. Willpower has a strong directionality. So willpower is that located in the third chakra is what allows us, for example, to stick to a commitment or to a direction in life despite the temptation or attempts from other external factors to make us go in a different direction. So that directionality, that willpower. So it's a more complex already understanding of power. And then the other important thing is that once we come to the level of the third chakra in Tantra and in yoga, something really, really new happens that we didn't have in the first chakra. Now we have polarity, duality, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, all the different oppositions. So here we already understand power as having two faces. And this is something that I'm really, really passionate about, because one of the tragedies of our modern culture is that it has somehow removed one of the faces of power, which means we are constantly told that developing power or leadership means being better and better and better at leading. But leading is just one of the two halves of the coin. Once we come to this level of understanding, the other half is following, or top and bottom, or however you want to call them. And so, from a shamanic standpoint, maybe not from a, like contemporary, I don't know, business model standpoint, but from a shamanic standpoint, if you want to understand power at this level of complexity, you need to learn both sides. You need to be comfortable in both sides. You need to lead and you need to follow. You need to go on and you need to surrender, and all of those. And actually, if you are going to practice any form of martial arts, for example, which are beautiful practice for the third chakra, you will always need to learn both, right? You will need when to oppose and when to yield, when to be hard and when to be soft. So power is both. So at this level, I would say the big takeaway, why is that?
Why is it? No, we can tell us the big takeaway and then I'll ask you.
So the big takeaway here would be that at this level already, you can only be a good leader if you're an excellent follower. When the time is right, of course. But if you are comfortable with both the yang and the yin, with both the active and the passive sides of the coin, and when you say why, it's basically because we are already now in the realm of duality. Imagine that you wanted to learn breathing. You couldn't learn breathing by just learning how to inhale better. Just won't work. You're gonna inhale, and not exhale. Like there is this rhythm, this duality, and this is really a tragedy in modern leadership, because when you don't know or understand how to be in the follower position, then you become attached to the not even attached to power, but attached to one half of power in a way that's absolutely unhealthy.
I mean, this is an aha moment for me, for sure. So we've gone from, like, in this map of the chakras, right, which is like this progression, this development of energy. Maybe we understand it, just to recap a little bit what you've been saying. We begin in the lowest chakra with this almost monadic or like singular rawness of just life force energy bursting
exactly
through, with no
indifferentiated.
No distinction whatsoever. And as it progresses and it develops, maybe we can think of it as maturing, coming into the world, realizing itself in some way. It starts to realize itself in one way over here and a different way over there. So we get differentiation and distinction. And this, according to this system, is a development that happens in a dualistic way. We get splits, right?
Yes.
It goes one way and it goes another way. So willpower also kicks in, because we have to choose sometimes, or we have the capacity to choose which way we go. And the nature of duality is like the nature of is oppositional, or like bifurcated. We get light and shade, we get positive and negative, we get splits like this. And what I hear you saying is that, like, we've totally idealized one pathway and completely let to atrophy the other pathway.
Absolutely.
Like, we don't see it as sexy. We don't see it as powerful. It's got bad branding. Like, we just, it's got bad PR, the whole thing. Being a follower, being a sheep, there's so many words that we use to denigrate that aspect of things. yeah, so what I hear you saying is actually like it's totally essential to go back and recuperate that portion of it. It's the yin portion. In a certain kind of language, maybe we call it the feminine portion, that more receptive portion of power. Um, yeah, yeah. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on like maybe the qualities or the characteristics of that um, of of that form of power versus the very like yang, go get 'em, seize everything kind of power that is maybe its balance.
Yeah, even when we speak about masculine power and feminine power, I think we're still trapped. We're trapped into
Mm,
thinking that one way or another we need to lead, whether we lead with the more directive, arrow-like style of the masculine, or more by invitation and magnetism. And that's all good because we can always,
mm,
see these two polarities in every aspect. But what I'm saying here actually is that at the level of the third chakra, at the level of Manipura chakra, the third chakra, we need to be comfortable with being a leader and a follower. We need to be able to enjoy and feel fulfillment in the situations where we're not leading. We don't know where the ship is going. We are following someone or something that is leading us. And inevitably in life, we will encounter these moments. And someone that has mastery of power at this level needs to be able to develop the capacity to feel when is the time to lead and when is the time to follow. And then, of course, when it's the time to lead, we can talk about different leadership styles. But because we don't do that, then we have, as you said beautifully, we have relegated the nature of the follower into the shadow. For many of us, not for everybody. There's some people that absolutely love, being. They feel comfortable in being followers. And for me personally, I will tell you that in my field where I operate, when I see someone very comfortable in following, that's one of the indications that I clicks in me to think, well, this person could be a great leader eventually. Because vice
mm,
versa, those who always want to be, at the top of the spear, it's problematic. It's problematic because it might be then creating a strong distortion and attachment to power, holding on to power. But if you really love power, which is one of my mottos nowadays, that loving power is totally fine. It's desiring power which is problematic. But if you love power, if you're in a love relationship with power, just as if you are in a love relationship with someone, you know that sometimes you need to guide and sometimes you need to be guided. That sometimes you need closeness and
mm.
sometimes you need distance. There is a dance like that.
Totally, yeah. The dance. A lot of people, and I think it's based on what you're just saying here. A lot of people would say it's bad to love power. Like we should renounce power altogether, perhaps, in order to find a different way. We all rise together, like sing kumbaya around the fire, this kind of thing. So potentially what you're saying, that it's beautiful to love power, is a lot of people might disagree with that. Like power
Totally. I will.
corrupts,
Yeah, I
people
would
say.
love to open it's a bit of a parenthesis, but let's go there. Like I think it was Jimi Hendrix that said, I don't know if it was during Woodstock or something, but he famously said something like, when the power of love will overcome the love of power, then there will be peace in the world. I think it's a great catchphrase, and for the time when it was spoken, it obviously was totally align with the zeitgeist of the moment and whatnot. But actually, I so fundamentally disagree with this. Like, I understand where this comes from. It comes from trauma. It comes from collective trauma around power. I myself,
Mm,
you were mentioning my biography, so maybe you know that I myself, I spent more than a decade uh, in the journey of not loving power and not loving money either, and it was an important journey for me. But then today I realized that there is an enormous difference between loving and craving. loving and desiring. The problem is to crave power. The problem is to crave money. When you crave something or someone, by definition, you don't love them. It's a two completely different kind of relationship. Loving something means to intimately want to know that energy and to respect that energy and to honor that energy. And so when you honor money and love money, it means that you know when to release money and not just when to grab it or bring it closer to you. And with power, so again, we're in the yin yang. Intimate love of power means developing the capacity to know when to come closer to power and when to leave space, just as you would do with a partner. Same thing. So nowadays, I would never trust, someone that presents themselves to me as a leader and they say, I hate power. So then it's the same as trusting sexual advice from someone that says, I hate sex. Like, no, thank you. I don't need you to give me any, to guide me in my sexual explorations, do your journey.
Yeah. But I guess that person would not be claiming outwardly, at least, to want leadership or want power. They're not going to be saying, "Oh, I hate power," at the same time as they're overtly, at least, striving for that power.
Well, actually,
so
yes.
Maybe there's some, yeah.
This contradiction is there all the time. I mean, you're right. You're pointing out to something that's so contradictory, right? When people say power is bad, power is evil, power corrupt, while at the same time wanting to rally a whole group of people behind them. So it's like you're using power in this very moment while saying it's a terrible thing. So there is a deep contradiction, but I have a lot of sympathy for that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing it. I think on some level for most human beings, it's very healthy to refuse power, because actually what you're refusing is the distorted, corrupted, traumatic power over style that we have grown accustomed to seeing around us. So you're basically saying, fuck you, no, I'm not like you, to all the different distorted models of authority that you've seen around you. That's fine. But then a moment needs to come in life when you're able to say, okay, wait a minute, those were distorted forms of power. Power in itself exists and is part of nature. It's part of life. So hating it or considering it like a curse is just a developmental stage, to be honest, that we may need to go through and then to get beyond.
Yeah, so interesting. So if we jump out of this parenthesis and back onto are we back onto the chakra path? We've been in the third chakra, and there's questions of willpower and choice and yin and yang expressions of power. Where do we go from there?
Great. So if we go upwards, then the next, there's 7 chakras and all of them are related with one another. But the next very important center for power would then actually be the third eye, the 6th chakra. Let's call it, taking this with a lot of grains of salt, the mind, actually. So there is a truth, there is a base to connecting power with the mind. And I just want to mention that when I jump to the 6th chakra, I'm obviously, jumping over the 4th and the 5th, the 4th being the heart chakra. So some people will say, wait a minute, can we jump over the heart? Well, just for the sake of clarity and clarification, yes. But obviously, we would always want people that hold power to have their heart activated, as well as their sexual center, as well as all the centers to some extent, right? But the 6th center, which, by the way, the 6th and the 3rd centers are very intimately connected in many ways. Don't have time to go into that right now, but just, there is a symmetry and a resonance there. The 6th center is when we refine power to the next level, and that means when power becomes more like a vision. So if you want a definition of that, it would be power at the level of the 6th center is the capacity that we have to influence the environment around us and to harmonize it with an inner sense, with an inner vision. So that's when you have a seed inside of how things could be in potential, and then you operate through energy in a shamanic understanding to harmonize how things are to how things could be according to the vision that you're holding. So that touches much more with the more traditional understanding of leadership, of having a vision. If you use this word, with care, you can even say a plan. There is a plan, but as I will explain, it's actually very different from the current understanding that we have of someone coming up with a smart plan and then having everybody follow it. But yes, at the level of the third eye, of the sixth chakra, every human being is able to tune into a sense of where things could move to, whether that's about like growing an organization or supporting the environment to thrive in different ways. So you have a vision, you have a germ that's located here, and it's infused with life force and it's infused with willpower from the third chakra. So you don't forget about those two. And then from the sixth chakra, the vision emanates, and then it creates, how when you put a magnetic field, if you file some metal and then put a magnetic field under it, then all the metal particles will start distributing in a certain pattern. So that's the power of the sixth chakra. So it's very, very powerful. It can be scary, people can become, suspicious of it. But again, when it's circulated in a way that's integrated and in the body, it's obviously a big factor of humanity moving forward. People in all ages have had this capacity to have a vision and unite others into that direction. I will say more about that when we talk about leadership, but just to give an idea of what power means at this level. So as you can see, it's much more complex. It's much more connected to the theme of leadership that we're going towards.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that brings up so many questions to me, both about this sixth chakra and how you work with that. Like and also with, it's a larger question. Are we talking about shamanic leadership? Like, are you talking about some of the things that are involved in shamanic leadership when you are talking about this journey through the chakras? So I've got these two questions, and maybe you can get to the second one. But I guess my question about the sixth chakra and this idea of a vision, I mean, I like this, like you're magnetizing people and you're really holding that vision in your mind and you're magnetizing people to it. And I guess it adapts and you adapt and the group of people adapts as it meets challenges as you move towards this vision and all these kinds of things. But maybe going back to the birth of that vision, how I am assuming imposing that vision, like, in a sort of very forced way, is not what we're going for, right? So could you say is there something to be said around sort of conjuring that vision, or like how can you birth that vision in the first place,
Yeah. So here is absolutely where we're going into the threshold of what shamanic leadership really means, at least to me. So I'm going to touch on your second question, which is, yeah, of course, if we're talking about power with this vocabulary that we're using of energies, of chakras, of different centers and yin and yang, so we're applying shamanic vocabulary to the theme of power, just as we could do to money or sexuality or anything you want to take into account. And that makes it in my opinion, much richer, than just, let's say, analyzing coldly, I don't know, like some historical characters, that were powerful according to history. So that's why it's shamanic. It's an angle that considers the whole human being in its embodied nature, but also spiritual nature and energetic nature. But now you're asking, the very, very relevant question. Wait a minute. Does it mean when we talk about power at the level of the sixth chakra that here is when someone gets clever, and wakes up one morning and says, I got it, guys, got the solution for everybody. So we just need to implement this version of of society, and everyone will be happy. And here's where I think the shamanic understanding of leadership now, more than just power, so leadership as in power applied to groups of people, right? Because so far we're just traveling through the body of one person, if you will. But then it becomes leadership when that journey then becomes a way that one person shows up in a group, or better, to be more precise, one way that a group organizes around one or more individuals. And that is exciting. And that is where, in my opinion, in my feeling, for what I can sense, we are discovering collectively right now that shamanic leadership has very little to do with the cleverness or capacities of one individual, one heroic individual, that is the leader and that guides. Even the word leader itself needs to be reinvented, and it actually has to do with a much, much more interesting phenomenon. And the phenomenon is how, in certain moments, certain individuals can become the interpreters, or the channels for the expression of the group consciousness. And this is a temporary condition. It's not something that they have as a gift forever. It's a temporary condition depending on a series of factors, and it's real. There is, every time you have a group of people, you will notice that there is some kind of self-organization that happens, and that occasionally this calls in certain individuals to step in and to become leaders. But leaders here actually means conduits. It's just when you have a storm, and you have a pole, like a very tall metallic pole, and that becomes the leader in that moment because it can channel the electric energy. But then the clouds move on, and they will hit somewhere else. So it's nothing or very little to do with someone's intrinsic qualities or badges or personality, and it has much more to do with group dynamics. And that's what I present to in every field that I can as shamanic leadership: the capacity to recognize when the cloud of power, if you want to visualize it like that, like a cloud that's hovering above a group of people, when that cloud stays on top of someone and then strikes them with a lightning, and then something needs to happen for some time. So that's one way to look at shamanic leadership from this angle. Make sense?
Totally. And there's so much in this. So much. It brings up something personal for me. I've received some feedback before that I don't seize the moment when or that it may be in some particular circumstances. I've let that cloud perhaps pass, like the lightning striking me, and I've chosen not to like be the conduit for that lightning. And it's very challenging to acknowledge that and recognize that was the case, because I had a moment, not necessarily, maybe my ego's ruining that missed opportunity a little bit for sure. But it's sad, I guess. It's disappointing to realize in retrospect that something was moving through me that could have been of so much benefit to the world, to the people around me, and I didn't take that opportunity. I didn't recognize that I had the lightning in that situation, and I wasn't ready perhaps, or I wasn't willing, or I didn't have the skills. Maybe there's some of these things. Maybe I had a real resistance actually to being a conduit for that lightning coming through me.
Yeah, I totally understand. I just want to say about that, though, that from this perspective that we're bringing here, yes, you can hold some part of the responsibility when that happens, because it's like basically in the mythological language, we would say when the call comes, you can choose to answer the call or ignore the call, and it's a choice that we all have, to say yes or not. So that part of responsibility stays with the individual, but then also a part of the responsibility stays with the group that you were part of in that moment, because this is a co-creation between the individual and the group. It cannot be just the single heroic individual that says, hey guys, I'm feeling the cloud above me, I'm feeling the lightning. By the way, I just want to give credit to our common friend Bruce Lyon for the metaphor of the cloud and the lightning. I borrowed this from him, and it's a great metaphor. So it cannot just be the one heroic individual. It needs to be a collective dance. So the collective, also the group, whatever group we're thinking about, whether it's in my personal life right now, surely this has a lot to do with ISTA, and the organism and the school and the organization. But it could be even just 8 or 5 to 8, friends going out for a field trip, and leadership emerges as we've all experimented that. So, but if the system is that the one individual has to seize control, then we're still like not fully into the emergence of collective consciousness, which we're all working, towards. But then there is another form of configuration where the group recognizes also, and that can be something as simple as, the 7 other people turning their head towards you, like, Simon, where should we go? So that's the invitation, that's the call. And then it's true, sometimes we can shy away and say, oh, I don't know, why should I decide? And that hurts. I've been there. That hurts, because it's like, actually, when I think about it, that was false modesty, that was like refusing a gift, and that was basically, telling them, no, I don't want your gift, and I don't want I'm not a yes to your request. Fair enough, we don't need to. But that's a genuine request from a group of people. When you feel all the eyes turning towards you, and understanding that request for leadership is momentary, it's temporary. So another time and another day, the cloud will be on top of someone else.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many directions we could go here, but I mean, if you were to develop this idea further, where would you take this? Like,
there is a lot of consequences from starting to look at leadership this way. I would say, let's say 2 major consequences, one for the individual and one for the group. So for the individual, when you start looking at leadership this way, it really requires abandoning, I'm going to use this term again, these heroic ideas, of like attaching one's self-worth to being the leader in a field, being the one that will be remembered as a leader, like attaching one's identity to this position is not anymore an option in this model, because power is way more impersonal than that. Power doesn't care so much about my personal story or your personal story, but it's just an energy that may need to go through me or through you. That's it. That's the end of it. So it requires actually from the individual really a sacrificing of the inflation of the body mind, of the inflation of the personality that can come through association with power. And that's a deep thing. It's not a false humbleness. It's not a false modesty. It's an actual recognition that if there is a plan, if there is a direction, it's way beyond me or you, and that on some level, each one of us, yes, we're all unique, but each one of us is replaceable. Like if you're not going to be the conduit, well, then that energy, just like water, will go through someone else eventually. It might be less smooth, it might be more, clunky, but power will find a way. So that's the big consequence, I would say, for the individual. For the group of any size, looking at leadership in this way means having to renounce to the idea of a father figure or a mother figure, however enlightened, however Aquarian and New Agey, that will keep us safe, that will guide us, that will show us the way, and having to reckon with the fact that for as long as an organizational organism exists, it will have to deal with power. And it will have to deal with power going in different directions as time passes and conditions evolve. So then it would be very wise, and that's what we're trying to do, for example, in ISTA, as you know, to develop ways and protocols and structures and habits even that allow us to feel together where is that cloud? Is it over you? Is it over me? Not in a sense to put people down or up, but to feel together, because it could be, when I feel the cloud being above me and I feel the lightning striking, through me, how do I know that it is actually like that and I'm not just in some form of megalomaniac, illusion? I cannot decide that by myself. I need the group. There is always a correspondence between the individual and the group. I can put my hand up and say, hey, I'm on fire. I've got this. I'd love to do this. I'd love to guide us. But then I need to wait for the response of the group. Or vice versa. The group can say, Raffa or Simon, we want you to, take care of the ISTA podcast. But then you need to feel whether there is a yes or a no. So in that interaction, then the group stays in a power relationship with the individual. And that power relationship has an element of courtship. It has an element of negotiation. It has an element of boundaries, everything that you have in relationships. And I think that, and I feel that groups need to become wiser and wiser dealing with power in this way. And so therefore develop more skillfulness to deal with power. Once you see leadership in this way, then you need to do it in an embodied shamanic way. You can't just entrust the handling of power to a constitution or laws or bylaws or powerful heroic personalities as it's been done before.
Yeah. One of the ways that I see this carrying out is in an ISTA training where we have 3 facilitators, right? It's not just one teacher. Yes, there's one lead facilitator who is sort of carving the path through, but there's a genuine sharing of the power in that situation between 3 individuals, and they're kind of it's not that everything's made up on the spot, but they're spontaneously feeling into, we might say, who has the hit or who has the pulse, some of the vocabulary that we use. Like, who in this moment is really feeling what is emerging through the group, and maybe has the words or maybe has the direction forward. And there's a real feeling, like it gets very subtle, the awareness of who it is going to be to step forward and maybe deliver the next piece or say the next thing in the room. And probably to other contexts, maybe people in meetings at work, they get a sense of this. Just conversations, as you mentioned, amongst friends. We've all probably got examples of this, but it's really interesting to hear this in the context of it being a question about power and shared power. Yeah.
And then just to add to that, Simon, if I may add one thing, then because we have this assumption that a leader is someone that knows where we are going, is someone that knows like the plan. In the totalitarian, craziness of Europe of the second half of the 20th century, well, no, the whole 20th century really, the big dictators like Hitler and Mussolini and Franco in Spain, they would call themselves the guides, in the different languages. So they were supposed to know where we're going all the time. And you can see where that resulted. Inevitably it resulted in those personalities leading massive amounts of people towards utter disaster. But in the shamanic leadership understanding, a leader is just someone that is channeling the lightning in that moment. They may have a vision of the next step or the next few steps, but they don't need to, and most often they don't, know where we're going, which is, can be scary if you think about it. It's like, we're leading by someone that doesn't know where we're going. Yes, because that person's mission is to feel moment by moment where collective consciousness wants to express itself. And then at some point, they will be unable to do that. And someone else will need to step in. And that's how a group consciousness can emerge that is leading the group somewhere, but no single individual in the group needs or can know the exactitude of the journey, like have the plan, so to speak, have the mission statement and all the, the organized plan. So this is a huge difference from the way things have been done in the past, and also from the way things are being done today. Because just imagine any politician, in any Western country that would go to the election saying, guys, I don't have a plan, but I pledge to be feeling in every moment what's best in the moment and getting out of the way to become as best a conduit as I can, for our collective intention and consciousness. They will not get any votes, unfortunately. Hopefully in the future they will.
Yeah.
I would vote for that person straight away.
Well, I mean, not to get too specific, but like we had a person like Marianne Williamson at the last presidential election in the United States, bringing through some, she had things, policies to stand, that she believed in and said she would implement, but she's bringing maybe a little bit of this more radical way of thinking into the mainstream political discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and we can be pretty sure she's not going to be the next president of the U.S. I
think. Maybe not.
Unfortunately.
Ahead of her time, perhaps.
Ahead of her time, for sure.
So, I mean, a question that comes up to me, trying to feel out some of the difficulties in this. How do you maintain it's a non-system? How do you maintain this non-system of power? How amongst a group of people, how do you ensure that people keep on supporting this way of doing things, right? What if someone who, like one of these dictators of history in Europe and, all other parts of the world almost, someone powerful enough comes along and changes the way things are done around power in a group of people? How can you, I'm sure I'm using the wrong word, guard against that? How do you keep the vitality in the group going forward, right? How do you ensure that people keep on showing up for that way of doing things? How do you keep it alive?
So, if we take one step back from the point where we were at before, when you see powerful personalities, as you said, like taking over a whole group, that's actually something that happens mostly at the level of the third chakra. When we went into that exploration, this is where willpower, like a very strong willpower, can dominate other wills, can, under certain circumstances, annihilate temporarily other wills. And then you get one person that has sort of like an excess of willpower, and then you get thousands or even millions of people whose willpower has been drained. That's an operation that happens at the level of the third chakra. So somehow, of course, you could say, okay, what systems can we put in place to avoid that? And that's a good inquiry. But I would say, at least from where I'm at today, that one of the best things we can do is to continue educating people to regain contact with their own body, with their own life force, first chakra, and with their own emotional body and willpower. There is an intimate connection between accessing one's willpower and accessing one's emotional body. You can't really have one without the other. You need to tap into your emotional centers, the belly. So the work that we do, for example, at ISTA Level 1, getting in touch with the emotions, and I say this every time I teach the basic emotional tools, that there's many reasons why you want to learn these tools, but one of them is because you become much harder to manipulate emotionally. And that's exactly what those people, those leaders, they're not really leaders, but more like those authoritarian figures do. They manipulate us at the level of the third chakra, particularly second and third chakra. So that's I think the way forward. I find it very, very unlikely. Even if you take, like something like ISTA, if we look at the organism from within, I find it very unlikely that something like what you described could happen. Like one powerful person just taking over everybody, and because there is too much self connection with oneself, and people that are connected to their emotional body and willpower. Yes, sure, they may go along with a powerful personality for a few weeks or whatever, but eventually this system will not work. You need a mass of people who are not in touch with their own power at the level of the third chakra to create those phenomena that you were describing.
Totally, I love this because it gives us this way of moving forward, like tapping into the emotional body, releasing obstructions, allowing energy to move through our emotional body, brings agency back to us. Like we can literally choose now to do something that is very hard to be stopped, to allow that power to move through us. Brilliant, so amazing. I have a lingering question around how to listen or how to recognize where that cloud is over a group of people. Like, how do you pay attention? So this is this metaphorical cloud, but it's really interesting. Like the cloud comes over, there's a bit of drizzle sometimes.
Yeah.
It can be dark.
Yeah, where is it?
Like it might be wispy clouds, like or maybe it's the middle of summer, like it is in Portugal right now. I haven't seen a cloud in a month.
Right, there's no cloud.
Yeah. So how do you sense? How do you listen? I get the idea, but how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a living question, right? We're discovering it, but first of all, through experience. Like when you work in a group of reasonably self-empowered people, eventually you will get to experience both extreme situations when this process works and when it doesn't, and they have a very distinct feeling to it. Like, for example, say that a group of people is trying to face a very difficult decision. There's opinions, pro and con. If energy feels stuck, it's like and then all of a sudden someone comes up and says, "Hey, people, you know what? Why don't we just do this?" And then you feel that there is a shift. No one had thought about it before. There is a new energy coming in. There is a sense of reorganization of the group. So that's a sign. That's a sign that we feel in our bodies. There is a sense of relief. There is a sense of lightness that, like, oh yeah, let's do it. It's good enough. Let's do this. And you will get an embodied sense of what it feels like when this works. So, and the opposite. So it starts from getting an embodied sense of feeling how it feels like. And then we need to develop structures and agreements around it. And I can tell you that from my experience, especially in ISTA, one of the, it may sound paradoxical, but one of the first things that needs to go is the idea of reaching all decisions by consensus. Like everyone needs to agree before we move forward. That blocks the possibility to feel the cloud. Because if for every important decision, each and every member needs to consult, am I okay with this? Yes or no? Then their gaze goes inward, right? Am I okay? Is my person okay with what you're proposing? Yes or no? And that's a totally different question from, is the cloud over you? Because there will be times when the cloud is over you and I disagree with what you're proposing. And in the framework of shamanic leadership, then I would be able to say, you know what? I don't agree, but I can see that the cloud is over you, so let's do it. Yeah, so it's a very different question from, we all need to vote, and only if we all say yes, then the proposal is accepted. So consensus doesn't work that well in that context. And so we need to find other ways to empower consent, to ask different questions, like, do you have a strong objection to this? Or is this good enough to try? There's different models at play. And then we need to develop healthy systems of feedback. So individuals within the group need to be able to receive feedback. And when I say feedback, I don't mean judgment. I just mean, how do you see me? I feel that the cloud is on me, but what do you see in me? And can I listen to you when you say, yeah, I feel that too, or no. And then can I also discount that inevitably, in a group of 8, 10, 20 people, there will be personal likes and dislikes, and you might, be biased against me, whatever, but that doesn't matter. It's the feedback of the group towards the individual that really matters. So when I come with my, sense of excitement, say, hey, people, we should really do this. I'm feeling it. I'm on it. Please say yes. I need to be ready for a yes and for a no, and to be willing to listen to that. And that's a skill that we all develop as we deepen into this exploration of power. It's happened to me many times, to have that excitement even in ISTA, and then the group of peers that I was with turning towards me and go like, nah, we like literally none of us feels the power in what you're saying. That's, of course, it's sad and can feel very hard, but it's a great experience to have. And then there are the moments when I or someone else, but I can bring it to myself, I am on fire for something, and the group consciousness says, yes, do it, and then I do it. So we need to have both experiences to become able to discover power in this way.
And even if it doesn't move, even if it doesn't go any further in that moment, maybe some kernel of it gets passed forward.
Exactly.
Maybe it lights up someone else, and actually what really did need to emerges as a result of you having really stood holding that lightning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you think of any great examples, like concrete examples where you've seen this playing out in your life? Have you witnessed anyone really seizing the lightning, and this notion of shamanic leadership?
Many times,
really
yeah, for sure. Many times in ISTA. But for me, if we go to my personal biography, I have to say, for me, the foundational experience with power and with shamanic power, I didn't use this word back at the time, happened when I was about 16 or 17 in high school. And me and another person, somehow, we don't really know how, again, it was an expression of collective consciousness running through us. But we organized the whole high school, which was pretty big, like 900 students or so, in such a way that we took over the school from the teachers and from the authorities of the school for 2 weeks, and we just ran it our own way. We locked everyone out, everyone meaning everyone but the students, and that became like an independent republic basically for 2 weeks, with all kind of crazy things, as you can imagine, but beautiful, amazing things. How did we do that? How did we get so much power in the hands of two teenagers, basically? And that is because it was an expression of collective consciousness running through us. And so we were, from our perspective, we were acting out of sacred power, and nothing and no one could stop us, and nothing and no one did stop us. So I had this experience at that early age, but then I also experienced the bitter side of it, because I wasn't able to integrate that experience in my sort of like personality. So I went through all the shades of ego inflation, and then feeling of solitude, and feeling of being different from everyone else, and resenting that, and then resenting power altogether. So it was a great experience shamanically, but it was way too much, if you will, for my psychological and characterial maturity at the time. But now, 30 years later, I can say I'm very grateful for having tasted that at such an early age. And then already in my 30s, still on the wavelength of power is bad, power is wrong, I spent a decade, as you mentioned when you were talking about me, in communities that made it a point to destroy power and to redistribute power. And it was a great experience. But then, of course, I learned that no matter how much you try to destroy it and redistribute it, you're actually just shifting the shape of power. So experiencing how power moves in totally non-hierarchical groups where there is no leader, no appointed leader, but then leadership emerges, and then what do we do with it, and is it right or is it wrong, was an amazing school of life for me. And then I learned that actually power has not so much to do with, being big and bold and just talking louder than anyone else, but it has to do very deeply with an inner vibration. And I saw amazing examples of that, of like, I don't know, I will never forget, like this petite girl in one of my communities, because we were confronting the authorities quite a bit, demonstrating, etc. And she would just lead us into charging, a wall of policemen and just breaking through them. But she was acting. She wasn't big. She wasn't, physically particularly strong. But her third chakra, her Manipura chakra, was so strong. So that's more like the third chakra, willpower, energy that I met in that poem. Not a lot of vision, not a lot of plan, but an incredible willpower. And when you see that at play, it's quite something. It's astonishing.
Mm, mm, mm.
And just to complete that, I would say that, more in ISTA is when I finally came full circle and I started to see the emergence of collective consciousness in a more complete way. It's still incomplete, don't get me wrong. We're still marinating in it. But as you witness yourself, the changes that ISTA's been through and the shifts in organization, etc., no one planned them. They just came out of collective consciousness, and then different individuals became sort of like the mouthpiece here and there of a voice that wants to speak through them. And that's just absolutely beautiful and hard and what needs to happen. So I'm totally aligned with that.
Yeah. So I mean, as we vibrate towards the end of our own conversation and meeting today, is there something you can say about maybe what is to be said about that moment or that phase when the cloud has been above you, it's struck you with lightning, you've seized it, you've landed something, and the cloud begins to pass, maybe over the head of someone else. That can bring up emotions in people who have felt that charge, that rush of energy, the adrenaline, the exhilaration, the clarity of being in that position, and then it passes, right? And it's Can you say something about this? How can we? Is it about celebrating that the end of that arc? For that person or that project or that journey and allowing it to, is it about smoothly letting it move on, or what's to be said there?
Yeah, very, very relevant question, that also touches me deeply. For me, what I will say is that the way I approach this and the way I would suggest is that if you are in power in any way in an organism or in a group of people, start to prepare for the time when the cloud will go somewhere else. Like it's like it can be a very challenging and brutal experience, and it doesn't necessarily come with a lot of warning signs before. So I think all of us, when we are in a power position, we need to prepare. We need to start. It's like preparing for death. You need to start healing your relationship with death before you're on your deathbed. And the more you do it, the more you will be able to live that transition with grace and even maybe with ecstasy. Because as you said before, power and responsibility come very intertwined. So the moment when the cloud goes away, yes, there is a release of power, but there is also a release of responsibility. And that can be so sweet and so liberating and so wonderful. It's like melting into some hot, warm substance. But because of how our personalities are, we need to prepare. So I would say that one of the main jobs of anybody who is in power is to start preparing their death or their way out or their transition out, however you want to call it, so that it doesn't take them unprepared. And from the standpoint of the group, of course, elaborating rituals of recognition that are clear, very clear. Like we need to be clear. The organism is right now derolling you from that power position. Ideally, with your full participation and celebration. That's what would be the most beautiful way to do it. And at the same time, we're honoring, of course, the service given, but creating a clear demarcation so that people can go through all the emotional implications of being derived from power, but then have clarity around it and enjoy the next phase.
Wow. Wow. So relevant for my life right now. And yeah, thanks for articulating it so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon.
If there was anything, is there anything still bubbling for you that maybe you'd want to, thinking of people who haven't stepped into the ISTA ocean yet, potentially. Like, so we've mentioned ISTA a bunch, and acknowledging that ISTA's trying to work in some of these ways that we're talking about. But is there anything bubbling away that maybe you haven't touched on yet, or wants extra emphasis? Maybe particularly with those people in mind who are.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about ISTA is that we don't shy away from sex, money, and power. We actually take them, which is basically a radical, if you will, tantric attitude. We take these energies as being part of our human and spiritual journey. The way currently the curriculum of ISTA is set up, I would say that in level 1, all these themes are present all the time, but in level 1 we would more focus on the sexuality part and also interrelationship part, and then level 2 would be more the place where we address power more specifically, and then the money piece is maybe one of the components that are part of the life field of level 3. So there's time, and there is a time for each, but I would say getting to grips with these 3 major themes is just a game changer, and it opens the door not only to a more powerful life, to be honest, yes, but also to a more serene life, to a life that's more at peace, because it has made peace with the existence of these energies, and it has disentangled our own identity from our sexuality or from our money or from our power, and actually de-roll them from being our money, our sex, our power, and seen them as energies that we can partake in and then move away from, just as the great river of life. And that brings an enormous amount of ease and calmness to the heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. So good. Thank you so much, Raffa. So many gems and a beautiful journey over this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for
Thanks
sharing
to you,
your
Simon. I
experience
enjoyed a
and
lot.
wisdom.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're open to a couple of quick fire questions, as we like to.
Oh yeah,
as we
you
like
you
to
do that in the podcast. I had forgotten. Okay, so this is gonna be
Yeah.
totally unprepared. Go for it.
Yeah. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
If you could have any superpower for a day, what would it be, and how would you use it?
Right now, it would be flying, and I would just like take off from my balcony that I'm just looking at and fly towards the sea, and then fly vertically upwards, and maybe even fly, over, beyond the Earth atmosphere and into the solar system. Oh my gosh, I would spend the whole day flying.
Amazing. If you're a fictional character, which genre or type of story would you want to belong to?
Very good one. I love this one. I would probably want to belong in fairy tales and myth, just because the power and the brilliance of the mythological characters is so fascinating for me, and it just speaks to the depth of my soul in a way that no other genre does, although other genres entertain me much more, and I have fun with all kinds of fiction and non-fiction, but myth and fairy tale and folklore speaks to the depth of my soul. So I would love to be in that realm, but I feel part of me is in that realm already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you could go back in time and have a conversation with any historical figure, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
There's many, many, many. I think right now I would have a conversation with Pythagoras, back in the 6th century BC, down in the south of Italy. And I would ask him about the music of the spheres.
Uh-huh. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
If you were to
basically,
create your
the
own,
rhythm and number of the universe and how the planets have different frequencies and sounds. This is just very alive for me right now.
totally. Wouldn't it be fascinating to get that, to have that conversation firsthand?
I would love
Yeah,
to.
and not have to sort of, yeah. If you were to create your own country, what would be its name and one law that you would implement?
The name of it, let me get back to that. The law would be that its borders are completely open and everybody's welcome in and out as they please at any time. And the name of it, I don't have a name. Like something like, actually, it would probably be an island, and let's call it like something like Time Island or Eternal Island, something like that.
Interesting. And finally, if you could communicate with any animal species, which one would you choose to communicate with? And what would you ask them?
Again, many. First one that came to mind was birds, and particularly eagles. And I would ask them, what does it feel like to fly high? And what does the world look like from their perspective?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Rafa, thank you.
You're
Some
welcome.
beautiful images there to join you in. Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yeah, such a great discussion, and thanks for generously giving your time. And I really look forward to the next episode we can create
Yeah.
together.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.